Hi everyone, welcome to the Food Curious Podcast, episode 4, and we are now in the year 2021, so this would be the first episode of the new year. Today we're talking about something that isn't quite entirely food related, but still feeds into the topic. We're talking about community, because after such a strange year, there were a few things we could learn or a few things that we took for granted and that we now appreciate on a much more deeper level. In discussing this topic, I'm actually going to be joined by a very special guest, my talented friend Gianni Jahziel, and he's the one that actually inspired me to discuss community today. Hey Gianni, what's up? Can you please introduce yourself to everyone?
Hey everybody, hey Mariana. Thank you for inviting me on the podcast to have this conversation. As Mariana said, my name is Gianni Jahziel, aka Kid Basil. I am a portrait photographer and visual artist based here in Jamaica. And that's me.
Hey, well that's the simplified version, but I'm here to tell you that Gianni is one of the most low-key, high-quality visual artists, in my opinion, or from the ones that I've met. So he's not going to be very loud on social media, and you may or may have not heard about him, but those in the know that Gianni produces some of the highest quality work out there.
Wow.
And I'm really not exaggerating. I'm just saying it because it's what I think. And you do a lot of really amazing photography work, especially.
Thank you very much.
So if you want to, you can follow @KidBasil on Instagram if you want to be in the know.
In the know.
In the know. Anyway, so Gianni, so you're here today for a reason, obviously, and you're part of what's inspiring me to discuss community today.
Okay.
Because last week you came by and we were both catching up and talking about, what last year kind of was for us and what we learned. And I think while we had two very different experiences, there was a common denominator that we shared, which was the importance of community. And he actually said something so powerful that I actually had to write it down. He said, I think people have recognized how important community is in the human experience. And while we were all rushing on sanitizers and toilet paper and all of that, and these were all learning lessons for all of us, what you said, I think people have recognized how important community is in the human experience is the real takeaway, in my opinion. So just elaborate on that a little more, because that's really your wording there.
Yeah, that's true. I think our conversation as it relates to that quote was stemming from what were the lessons that people, you had to ask me what were some of the lessons that I think people are learning through COVID. And for me, I thought it was community. It was the importance of other people that have a shared experience with you. How important it is for people who go to work and see the same people every day, and then all of a sudden they're not seeing those people anymore, right? And now you kind of have to build a different type of relationship with these people. No, you're not in the cubicle next door. You don't have the joker that's coming down that's gonna rag you in the morning. But no, you kind of have to build that through a Zoom call or a Skype call or Discord or whatever that conversation, wherever those conversations happen. And also, that's also not the same type of relationship that you're building with those individuals.
Yeah. Like even when you just mentioned Zoom right now, people jumped on that so quickly because we realized we needed to operate with our communities, even if it wasn't the same and I had to switch to online. But the number of people that were using Zoom so quickly. Yeah. I mean, that was like worldwide. Everyone had to join Zoom because we couldn't work without community. And even if you talk to a lot of parents who have kids, you would hear their kids could still, like the young kids, the new generation, they could still do online learning because they were born into the technology. But if you ask them what they missed, it was their friends. And again, it goes back to community. You know,
Yeah.
they didn't miss like the homework and all that. They just missed their friends, you know? And so that's why what you said was so powerful, and it's something like history repeats itself, and we think that we learn lessons from history. And obviously, this is a first experience for all of us that are like alive right now, because it's pretty unprecedented that any of us who are alive right now have dealt with such a global crisis. So we did say hand sanitizers, toilet paper, food, blah, 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 and we restricted anything else that was community oriented. And maybe it's a tricky thing to say. I don't want to say we should be focusing on community more. God forbid, like, I wouldn't want this to happen again. But we definitely have a deeper appreciation
Definitely,
of human connections.
of human connections. I think one of the things that I had started doing last year was I had started doing these games evenings with some of my friends. And some of those guys I was recently introduced to them, like, not necessarily through another friend. I just kind of made that connection with them. And then even more so through the games evenings, we have become even better friends. And part of that, for me, my interpretation of it is that kind of like with gaming, I mean, you're creating a world and you kind of having ups and downs, especially like if you're not necessarily playing a game like Solitaire or something, but you're playing something more like Settlers of Catan or Dominion or some other game that requires a little bit more brain power and a little bit even more plotting, scheming, a bit of backstabbing and stuff like that. It builds an experience that you have with people, whether it's happy, whether it's sad, but then at the same time, it's sad just because like a backstab you, but it's not necessarily out in the world, so to speak. So you kind of build in these manufactured experiences that you have with these people, and that deepens the relationship that you have. Because effectively, I mean, it's the same thing if you went to go play ball on the field with some of your friends and you salad one of them or you score, like you get them 10 love, right? Like that is an experience in itself. And I think that for many people, work and going out, we're talking about partying as well, work and going to parties and stuff like that were those experiential activities that they took part in, or experience manufacturing activities. And with COVID, it definitely kind of just like eradicated 90%. And I'm just saying arbitrary numbers here, but like most of it was gone. Most of that experience was totally wiped out. And yeah, I think people started to recognize, oh, ratted. I'm not seeing this person. I'm not seeing that girl. I'm not seeing that guy. I don't see my cousin in how long, right? And they started to realize like wow, like relationship building is kind of very important. And the relationship building happened because I was at work, because I played football with these guys every week, because I went to games night, because we did go party. You were telling me about people who leave Jamaica to go a next country so that they could go to party, because party was the thing that they did. They were party goers, right?
Yeah, exactly. So we just took it for granted because it's, you know, it's what we did every day for years and years and years, and what our parents did and grandparents did to a certain extent. And we took it for granted. And I think the interesting thing is, and this is why I chose the topic community today, and I'm not talking about like salt or hummus or avocado or anything, is because it's something everyone will relate to. And I knew it because me and you experienced last year differently, but the same when it came to this.
Yeah.
Because you were working remotely from home. Because of the nature of what you do, you can't do that.
Yeah.
But I run a restaurant.
Yeah.
So I have to physically be
you have
present.
to be here. Yeah.
And then we already had a pretty strong community in the first place. And now I have to still physically show up every day in the uncertainty and still preserve a form of, like, you were online and I was offline
Yeah.
community. That's
Yeah.
what we experienced.
Mm-hmm.
And they're different but similar. And I mean, there's so many examples that I can pull out from last year that made me appreciate how important community is. Actually, I think it was like my lifeline. Because I'm not so much of an introvert. I can be sometimes, but I'm still very much a people person. And I think it was my lifeline. Like, we all understood, okay, we have access to the materialistic things, or at least if you're in a fortunate position, you have access to basic materialistic things.
Yeah.
But after a while, you're just craving being around friends. You're craving like a sense of normal social communication
Mm-hmm.
that
Mm-hmm.
isn't with masks on, that isn't at the supermarket, because supermarkets are now hangout spots. Like, if you bump into someone you know.
That's so sad, but so true.
But it's true. Like, and there's a lot of memes like that are, that if you bump into someone at the supermarket now, and people dress up to go to the supermarket, and it's all like, this is how collectively as humans we craved for community, and the good kind. Because on the other hand, it could be a bad community, and you realized, like, a lot of relationships ended last year.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you want to be like community in its worst and in its best? We really had a different appreciation of it. So if you're with the wrong person last year, you made sure to get out of there like ASAP.
Yeah.
And if you're with the right person, you strengthen the bonds.
Yeah, double down on that.
Right. And it might be like something really beautiful grew out of that. And there's like a lot of babies and pregnancies and all sorts of things.
Yeah. Yeah.
So anyway, so I guess what I wanted, so you had the online experience because you were working from home.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I had the offline experience because I had to be physically here.
Yeah.
We're recording from the kitchen, by the way. I had to be physically here.
On location.
Yeah, on location, and still dealing with, with customers, with suppliers, with farmers, all of that. So life kind of went on in a very strange way. And there's a lot of instances last year that can define the strength of community. And I'll share mine later, but I want you to share yours first, because your story is really cool.
In terms of like the strength of online communities?
Yeah, because I can share the offline perspective.
Oh yeah, sure. The story that I had mentioned last week when we were speaking was, and this is a blast from the past for everybody who's listening. This is not recent. This is, I want to say, about 7 years ago. So I play this online game, or I used to, from time to time, called World of Warcraft. And one of the people who I used to play with, so I used to play with a guild. And then I remember, you have people online and you have their real IDs. So if I'm playing with Marianne, I know it's Marianne and not necessarily White Rose Garden, for example, as a player name. Like, I actually know Marianne, I know her voice, I have her name, we're friends. But this person went offline for the longest while, and I remember everybody in the guild, because we play with her so often, everybody was just like, where is so and so? Let's call her Betty for now. Where's Betty, for example? And one of the things we're looking out for her for a very long time. We had played with a few people that didn't necessarily know her in real life, but knew her longer than we did, for example. And
so in that online gaming,
in that online gaming community, they were with her from a previous group of friends guild. And then so I had started, because I knew her real name, I started looking for Betty online. And I remember I spent months looking. I expended all knowledge of the internet back in like 2013 looking for this lady. And then I found her through, and this is kind of sad for those who are listening, but I was kind of happy at the same time that I found her. But I found her obituary online, and that allowed me to spiraled down a rabbit hole of like finding other things for her online and kind of just like figuring out who she was and stuff like that. I found her on a forum. It turns out she had cancer.
Oh wow.
And I'm looking through like years of forum posts with this lady having conversations with other people who have cancer, because this is a forum for those going through chemo and stuff like that.
And forum is a form of community also.
Yeah, and for exactly, because like that
yeah.
was her community for cancer treatment and such. And it kind of made sense to me when I was going through it, because like, okay, cool, because I know we had a photo of Betty and she was bald, and I never really thought much. I never thought anything of it at the time, but now going through the forum, I was like, oh, chemo, whatever. I was just like, wow. And then I remember going back and I was like, guys, I kind of found Betty, but it's kind of sad if you want me like to know and whatever. So Ventrilo, so like even before Zoom was like Skype, before Zoom was Discord, before Discord was Skype. Everybody knows Skype.
Yeah, everyone knows Skype.
In the ancient days of the internet, you had Ventrilo.
Okay, I don't know that one.
Right?
Yeah.
So
Ventrilo?
Ventrilo.
I must have missed
We'll
that
call
one.
it Vent for short. But yeah, so like legitimately, we set a date. The guild leader set a date, and like everybody was online. And then I kind of just dispersed the information that we had, and then there was a moment. Yeah, there was definitely a moment of like mourning. I mean, even though I'm kind of choking up
Even though
talking
you never
about
met,
it.
yeah, I can see it. You guys can't, but I can see it. And you never met this person.
I never met this person. I only know her voice, and I have like 2 photos. I had at the time like seen 2 photos of her, but outside of that is straight voice. Like if she called me on the phone, I'd know it would be her, but if I saw her in person, probably not, you know? And then, yeah, and like everybody in the guild was just like, oh, wow, right, and we kind of had a moment there together, morning, and then also like that quickly kind of switched into like, oh, yo, like, can we, I mean, not necessarily what can we do, because I mean, like I said, she had already passed. The boys just like, can we connect with anybody from the family or stuff like that? And this is, again, guys, it's like 7 years ago. So I'm remembering it very vaguely, but also very distinctly. But yeah, I don't know what we had planned or had in mind to do, but we just kind of knew we wanted to do something, right? And yeah, that was just my example of like online community, and that bond that we shared was because of a shared experience of playing the game, right? We wouldn't necessarily have had that outside of the game. For example, if it was just like to call people or just to be texting in a random big group chat, that's not necessarily an experience. But for example, like in the game you raid, the name is raiding, but it's like playing together. So it's just like every Monday, every Wednesday, every Saturday and Sunday at 7:00, everybody's online. Like you and 25 other guys are online in voice chat before voice chat was a thing inside Ventrilo. And that's how I know this lady, you know? And like she's there every time. I'm going to college and I'm just like, my class finished 5:00. I need to make sure I reach home before 7 because like daylight savings, they're ahead of me. So 8:00 is call time, but I need to be there for 7, and I'm there at 7, and then everybody's online. Everybody's pulling their weight in the task that we need to do. We'll mess up. We'll spend the whole night messing up. We don't achieve anything the night, but everybody is still online, still game, figuring out what they did wrong, whatever. But that's the type of shared experience that builds bonds, that builds relationships, and yeah.
Yeah, that's a really powerful story, because it's online. It's someone you've never met, but they've just become part of like your Wednesdays, of your Fridays.
Yeah.
And you've never met them, but they start to play this really important role. And, you know, when someone goes missing, it goes to the point where you want to even find out what happened
What
to
happened?
them.
Yeah.
You know, it's like a
Yeah.
real like cause for concern, and that's a really moving and powerful story, and that's an online experience. And I'm not making a direct comparison, but I just want to show. I think when you like have a point in common, that might be, or when you feel like you belong to something,
Yeah.
and everyone else who's part of that something likes the same thing like you. That's why you all belong to that same thing.
Yeah, yeah,
Like
yeah.
in your case, it was that
It
game.
was the game, yeah.
But like on a very different online example, and it's not to take what you're saying lightly, because what you're saying is,
No, it's just a different example,
yeah,
Mariana.
because you're gonna laugh at what I'm about to say. So I am one of those people who follow a lot of dogs on Instagram. You know, there's like animal
Okay.
accounts, right? So
Okay.
I'm one of those people. Those dogs have
You're-
like millions of followers.
You're one of those guys.
Right. I'm one of those people because one day I'm going to have my own dog. So I'm one of those people who follow like cute dogs on Instagram, which is a whole interesting phenomenon. And that's like a discussion for another date. But I remember
Food Curious,
one-
episode 10. We're talking about dog food.
one of my favorite dogs, who I believe lives in Japan. And I never understood anything in the captions because it was always in like Japanese. I remember that one post showed up like a month ago. This is actually recent, where the owner had announced that the dog passed away.
Yeah.
And that's really tough when that, like, you're not into like dog Instagram accounts, but when the pet passes away, it's like a really big deal for everyone who follows that account.
Yeah.
And like I saw the comments, there's like thousands of comments, and people were sad, and there's like crying emojis. And yeah, and it's the same. So that's an online experience, So that's like a pet that I guess just brought a little moment of like cuteness to everyone's life. And in your case, it's like a much, much more human experience,
Yeah.
So whether it's like last year, 2020, or whether it's 6 years ago, community, it's a timeless thing. It's just how humans need to survive.
It's how humans need to survive.
Right.
All relationships kind of define. I'm definitely paraphrasing this, but I think I'm not even paraphrase. The essence of what this lady was saying, and this is from another podcast that I was listening to. I listened to too many. But she was saying that your life is kind of defined by the relationships that you have, right? And then also like your relationships kind of inform the type of person that you're going to be, if you look at it in a way. For example,
which is true. Like I do believe in that.
Yeah, like I mean, if you have a relationship with your wife, your girlfriend, whatever it is, it's just like you kind of want better for yourself because they're also pushing you and you're kind of pushing them. So then you become a better person. You have your brethren them where you par with, and like your brethren just get a promotion. So now he's like assistant manager, and it's just like, ratted, I kind of need to up my game now. Not necessarily that like it's pressuring me, but I kind of want part of my brethren.
Yeah,
I don't want.
You.
Yeah, exactly. It's just like I don't want this
you,
gap to, or even inspiration is one, and then like I just don't want this gap to get any wider. Not as a negative thing. I just want us to be close. You see me? So like that kind of inspire you in a different way. You see me? So your relationships kind of define where you're gonna be and who you are, because like what your friends ask of you is like a different thing as well, right?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
So the relationships that we have definitely inform the person
and I think like
in front of us.
Again, like, you have to be very careful talking about what happened last year and that we still are feeling the effects of. But I do think, like, at one point we just realized, I don't know, at one point it really kicked in, but we said, okay, like, I remember for a while people thought there's going to be a food shortage and toilet paper shortage, and none of that really happened. We were very fortunate in Jamaica to not experience that, which says something about the times that we're living in.
Yeah.
Global trade and all of that was still able to run during these times. It's not like a world war where people are really starving and really having food shortages.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I did not see, like, at one point, as someone who cooks, I actually thought we were going to have to work with, like, flour, rice, and oil, and maybe, like, whatever thing was going to grow. Because that's what a lot of people experienced, like, back then during world wars. You know, and they were just living, like, a lot of recipes were emerged from those times because they had to just use what they had. So I think now we live in a time where, fortunately, many people, even in a country that's still growing like Jamaica, can access many basic things and even certain not basic things, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think at one point we realized, okay, the shortages are not going to happen, guys, and if they are, it's super short. But what we're really missing are these human connections, our communities. And yes, like, you can have very intense experiences online, but the offline ones are the ones that count, in my opinion, like the in-person,
Yeah, the
face-to-face.
interpersonal. Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
like Zoom calls, like, even for work, like, how much Zoom calls can you do?
How
You know
much
what I
Zoom
mean?
calls can you do?
Right. So, anyways, I wanted to share. So, you know, you shared a really, really awesome example of online, and I
Mm-hmm.
wanted to share a lot of moments offline, in person things happened at the kitchen last year
Okay.
that made me appreciate, you know, human connections and just how grateful I am for the very, very awesome crowd we get.
Okay.
We have like I think the kitchen. I've always believed that food is a community builder.
Mm-hmm.
That's always my belief from day one.
I think that was probably like the first community below, was it not? Like,
Probably religion,
probably.
food,
Yeah.
probably like power also.
If we even predate religion, for example, hunter gatherers, the food is like it's like a
survival,
ritual.
really.
Yeah, but like there would be I'd imagine I'm imagining cavemen sitting around a campfire eating food and probably in their own language talking about the hunt that they did the day before or whatever, and then telling stories to their kids about whatever. So I think that's probably like one of the earlier forms,
you're actually absolutely
most universal
right.
too. Yeah.
You're actually absolutely right. So I've always believed that food is a community builder. And that's why, like, the kitchen is set up the way it is, where there's like no walls, and we have like very loyal guests who come over and over and over, and I'm very, very grateful for that. And a lot of things happened last year where I think community went a step further, and I would like to think for the better good. And I'm only going to share one story today, because this is the one that really made me realize what we can do if we all work together and like believe the same thing.
Okay.
I remember when the pandemic just broke out and tourism kind of just overnight like shut down.
Yeah.
A lot of farmers that supplied to the hotels obviously had nowhere, like, they had a lot of unsold produce that couldn't go anywhere now because the hotels were out of business, and that represents a huge part of Jamaica's economy and GDP, tourism in general. So we're talking about like a lot of produce here. And I remember I was reading it, and then I started to feel it, because for a while we would have a lot of farmers come knock on our doors and say, hey, like, I'm selling this. You know, I have no one to sell it to. Are you interested in buying some from me?
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, so that's when I was like, what I was reading about I started to actually see it and experience it myself. Anyway, so I remember very well, this guy comes to the kitchen and he introduces himself and he says he's a farmer from St. Elizabeth and he has some things he wants me to take a look at. So I'm like, okay, like, let's go check it out. And he opens like the back of his truck, and he says he has like pounds and pounds and pounds and pounds and pounds of grape tomatoes and sweet peppers. And he wanted to know if I was interested in buying from him. And I asked him, I told him, well, what's your story? Like, how come you're stuck with all of this? He said, well, usually I supply to the hotels, but we have no one to sell to. And then he said something, and I think this was what caught my attention and really made me feel a way. He said, last week we donated 200 pounds of fresh produce to people in quarantine at the hospitals.
Wow.
And I was like, wow. I'm like, you guys are like, I have a lot of respect for farmers, especially the ones that, you know, that have a passion for what they're doing. And I was like, wow. I'm like, on top of all the losses that you're going through, you are so generous to like give also. Like you're losing and you're still willing to give more. And that I just had so much respect for that, and it just went straight into my heart. And I told him, you know what? I'm going to buy from you today, but I think we can do something together where I organize like a farmer's market at the kitchen, and we announce it and we take pre-orders and we sell your produce at the kitchen.
Yeah.
And maybe like, even if it's like not as much as what, you know, you might expect.
Normally, yeah.
But at least it's something.
Yeah, it's better than the current situation.
Right. And this is like a 15-minute conversation with someone I've never met before who just knocked on my door. His name is Oniki from St. Elizabeth. And in that instance, like I didn't even have to think about it. I just decided in that moment, we're going to do this.
Yeah.
So I went back home, and that same day, I didn't waste any time. I put an announcement out saying, hey, everyone, this is what happened. I met someone, blah, blah, blah. And we got to help these farmers out because it can't be that we're throwing, like, it's really, you can't throw food. Like, food is not a joke in my world.
Yeah.
And I said, we're going to organize, like, a tomato sale. And here's the link for your pre-orders, blah, blah, blah. And the tomato sale is on this date. And it all happened very fast. I think in 2 days, we had like 500 pounds worth of pre-orders.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, my team and I, and like big up my team because they go along with like a lot of the crazy things I suggest. But all of a sudden, Tamika was market woman. So Tamika's one of my team members. So like I was on the kitchen side with Mel. Joel was like Mr. Hand Sanitizer, if you guys all know who Joel is. And Tamika was just the market lady. And and the whole, and people would come, they picked up their pre-orders. And I think in like one day we did something close to like 500 pounds. And then I realized that there's a lot of, this is an alternative way of saving some of the produce that is currently going to waste. Maybe if all the restaurants did this, like cumulatively,
yeah,
we could work hand in hand as a food community and really save a lot of weight of food, beautiful local produce from going to waste. So anyway, so we did it. We did these farmer markets at the kitchen, I think 5 or 6 times. Until the curfew got like super restrictive that we had to stop. And over the period of all of that, I think we hit like over we hit over 1,000 pounds of produce, just from like one encounter with a farmer.
That's amazing.
Right, we did over 1,000 pounds at the kitchen because we have really, really cool guests who get it. And with the farmers who are obviously willing to play play this game with us, well, this good game, and then my team who are willing to like play farmers market, to play market people, and and like just like that, like and I always thought like if one small place like me could do 1,000 pounds. What would happen if like 50 other restaurants went on board?
Could do the same, right? Yeah.
And to me that's really the most. We did a lot of community projects last year, but that was the first one, and that was the one that made me realize like, you know what? Like we can really do some very cool stuff together with my guests, with my team, and with the farmers.
Yeah.
And the great thing is that I'm still in contact with that farm in St. Elizabeth. And we're actually
Oniki.
they've actually Taji and Oniki, they've actually grown during that time. So
Wow.
they didn't like kind of sleep on during the pandemic.
Yeah.
They started growing new things, and we're actually selling new varieties of tomatoes
Okay.
at the kitchen next week.
Okay.
So it's like not only we did something good, but there's like a continued relationship
Yeah.
that we're taking into this year.
Yeah. That's beautiful.
So yeah, so that was really beautiful. That's like, I guess, your story is an online one and mine is an offline
one. Yeah. That story reminded me a few years ago I watched there's this documentary series on, is it documentary? It's kind of documentary. It is documentary. It's a nice documentary for anyone interested. It's called Chef's Table on Netflix. And this chef, Massimo Bottura, from
he's
Italy, he's one of the top chefs in the world.
Yeah.
He goes around so he has numerous restaurants. His main one being in an old village in Italy that people come out to, and they're booked like however many years in advance. But he has a non-profit that he runs, and what they do is they go around to all the restaurants in Italy, and get their food, their scraps, or what they're gonna throw out that day, and then they get some of the best chefs in Italy to make cuisine level food with the leftovers, with the foods that they're gonna throw out, and feed it to the homeless in the evenings. And I think, I don't want to say they do it every day, but they do it a couple of times for the week. That's beautiful. And then so what you said to me, it just made me think of that.
Actually, Massimo Bottura is someone I've always been I respect what he does, because he's a chef, but he's not one of those like angry, stuck-up chefs. Like he's actually very conscious, and I think he's one of those chefs who was in that early wave of, okay, we're chefs, and we have a responsibility. And I think for a while there was this very elitist thing about that fine dining world, where it's all about like fancy ingredients and only catering to the rich.
And with the rarest of the rare.
Right. And I think Massimo has, he's able to work with very simple ingredients. And then he realized, like, we have a responsibility, which is we can't keep wasting food like this.
Exactly.
And actually he opened the project Refettorio. I can't remember what the full name is. It's like I think Refettorio, and in Brazil they have a Gastromotiva branch, if I'm not mistaken. They have a branch in Paris in a very historic building, and they work, do you know the street artist JR? He does the black and white photo collages.
Of course.
So they actually, look at how they took the concept of community even further. So that social initiative by Massimo also exists in Paris, but they brought in JR to design the space,
the interior,
and kind of become like an ambassador and a spokesperson for the place. And I think he even designed the plates with this image of like black and white hands, which is his signature style, is black and white photography. And that's what they do. They go and they partner with restaurants who have unsold restaurants, hotels, supermarket, any stuff that you did not use that is still perfectly edible. They take it and they work with, like you said, top talent. And they make these stunning meals that are for free, actually. And they get volunteers as well. You can volunteer. It's like a volunteer kitchen. Also. So anyone working there, other than like the chefs they select, are volunteers. And that is how we need to kind of, that's a prime example of community. And they still were doing it, by the way, during the pandemic. They were still able to do it because so many restaurants shut down. Paris.
Yeah, exactly.
So it was like even more
supply.
Right. So they still did it. So I think, so that's actually a really, really great example. And I guess subconsciously, it's people like Massimo that really inspire me, and kind of and even like, anyways, if I start talking about this, I'll never stop. But it even goes back to like my grandma and like
next episode of Food Curious.
Right. It even goes back to like my grandma and how she was very resourceful. Like nothing went to waste. And I grew up in that. We never
with that mindset.
We didn't throw anything at home.
Mm-hmm.
It's very, in my culture, it's like haram is what we say. Like
Haram?
haram is like, I mean, in a general terms, it's just something you just can't, it's sinful.
Okay.
Yeah, so
Okay.
it's haram to waste food.
Okay.
Yeah, and you have to do it.
Harram?
Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah. So anyway, so that's my story. You shared a really, really awesome story. I think both of our stories are pretty exceptional. You know, pretty special, and that's why I wanted to share that, and all goes back once again, because we're coming towards the end of this podcast, but it all goes back again to what you said, Gianni, which is, I think people have recognized how important community is in the human experience.
Yeah.
So I'm going to say that again because it's really, really powerful. I think people have recognized how important community is in the human experience. Whether it's online, whether it's offline, I even think like hashtag challenges are a form of very brief community.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
Yeah, I think the concept of a hashtag
The concept of a hashtag,
be
yeah.
some form of community if
Yeah,
you really
because
think about it.
that is the shared experience, you know?
Yeah.
And it's kind of like, for example, if we're coming to the end of the episode, but just an aside, just as you pick up the hashtags, I remember on Twitter many years ago, I haven't used Twitter recently, but one of the things that I used to do a lot was used to have these chats on Twitter, right? And for example, it would be like hashtag food curious, right? And every Monday at 7 p.m. from 7 till 8:30, hashtag food curious. They're gonna drop questions. It's gonna be guided. So it's gonna be guided by like.
Do that?
I have no idea. I can't tell the last time I used Twitter.
Yeah.
But you'd have these chats, and like legitimately, you could find websites that had all the chats listed. If you're in marketing, you could find it. If you're in accounting, you could find it. If you're a garbage man, there's probably a sanitary chat that you could find with somebody moderating it with like maybe like 5 questions for the hour, which would be one question every 10 minutes or so. And then you'd have people responding to the questions, and then Mariana would respond, and then I would respond also, but then I would also tell Mariana what I thought about her response, and I'd be telling however many people as I could, so you'd be having so many conversations going with Twitter.
I've never really used Twitter, but I remember that thing.
Yeah.
Right.
So, as you said, a hashtag, it just made me think about that. And people were having conversations. Like I said, I don't know if they still do the chats, but yeah, full-on chats for an hour. And you'd go on every Monday at 7.
Well, now
and
you have
I'd see
Instagram
Mariana.
Live.
Instagram
Live
I
has
guess you have
replaced
Instagram Live, but at the same time, I mean, even I go into Instagram Live, and like sometimes you're in some of the lives, and it's just like it's like 3 people online, or it's either 2. I mean, well, I guess a small community is a better community, but at the same time, people are talking, but you can't necessarily follow the conversation because it kind of disappears a little bit after a while, and you really have replies. But what I'm saying is, you either have too little people, which, like I said, can be a good thing, or you have too many people and everybody's just dropping wave emojis. Like, hi, I'm here. And then that's everybody.
Yeah.
Right?
I will say, I'm just going to say one last thing, and then we have to wrap this. But I think another, you know who actually really understood community really well last year? And I know everyone's going to be able to relate to this, is Swiss Beats.
Okay.
Alicia Keys' husband.
Yeah.
And the versus sessions he was doing.
Yeah.
And the one with
Bounty Killer and Beanie Man.
Right. Like that one, like
blew up.
I feel that one just blew up. Boom. I mean, that whole initiative he did was just brilliant. I think he realized music is also another big one.
For sure.
Yeah, music because music is a community builder also. But yeah, Swiss Beats definitely tapped into community in a really cool way last year. And all his sessions just blew up, and so that's another great example. But anyway, we are gonna come to an end. So I don't know. I mean, I don't know what you guys I hope everyone found this conversation interesting. I don't know what everyone felt was the big takeaway from last year, or what we took for granted that we're reassessing now.
Mm-hmm.
But if there's something, leave it in the comments when this podcast is uploaded.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, Gianni.
Or tag us, better yet, leave it in the comments, and we'll definitely be there for a bit. And also tag us on Instagram as well. Like comment on the podcast episode post on either of us pages. Yeah.
Hey, Gianni, thank you so much for joining. And for just like the awesome, we always have good conversations. That's something that I like. We always can really get into a conversation and like dissect it. So this was a really good one.
Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, no problem. And guys, if you are an art lover, I'm just gonna do a plug for like shameless promotion for Gianni. That's not really the objective of this podcast, by the way. It's just to have a really cool conversation. But yeah, if you don't know his work yet, check it out. Gianni really has an eye, and it's clean. It's clean. That's all I have to say. And it's good quality work, and he's now working on this new photography project. But just check out his Instagram account to find out more. He's one of I think he's an artist to watch, as much as I hate that kind of term, but he is an artist to watch, in my opinion. Local artist to watch. Hey, cool. I'll see you soon, Gianni.
Thank you.
Hey, bye everyone.
Bye everybody.